One man, one Murloc, one giant angry badger. This is Blue Please. It begins now. Yes, indeed, folks, you tuned into Blue Please here on WoW Radio with myself, Total Biscuit. Welcome to the show, and welcome to all those new listeners who've tuned into us tonight for one thing and one thing alone. One exclusive method interview coming up just a little bit later on in the show. 65 glorious minutes of Sko and Ray and their opinions on pretty much everything. Any questions that you might have had to have answered, well, you had a week to post them in our thread on the forum, and they did tackle very many of them indeed. All the drama, all the secrets, everything, it's all there, and it's coming up just after this 15-minute speech segment in which I speak about WoW, not entirely surprisingly. Alright, so what we generally do in Blue Please is we will start and end each show with a feature that we like to call Second Wind, yes, it allows for continuity between the two shows. I will ask a question at the end of my show, give you guys a week or so to respond, and then I shall read out your answers and we shall discuss the topic further and see if it's progressed. Now, last week, one of the hot topics, of course, was the PTR, Public Test Realm, which is for testing publicly, one would imagine. And we asked the question, what on earth is it there for in the first place, and is it remotely useful in any way, shape, or form? And I had many, many answers, as I do every week on this Blue Please. Right, let's see what we got. Many second wins. Now, I want to read one from Endra here, who says this. This is regarding fixing the PTR. So obviously somebody believing the PTR is not working as intended. Is the PTR being used to its potential? I could say without a doubt that it is not. It's been pretty clear from the major bugs in raids and just in the game world itself that improvements could be made to the testing system. First of all, what do the majority of the people do when they actually go to the PTR? I can only speak from my own experience, but out of maybe 5 trips to the PTR, I've only once actually tested a change. The rest of the times were either to try new talent builds without worry about wasting gold, or to see item buffs and nerfs that directly pertain to my class. I do know that when we were able to choose pre-made characters, dueling was quite popular, but this too doesn't help catch bugs. As such, one change I would like to make would be to flat out disable dueling on the PTR. Next, I would offer a small incentive for those who are actually testing content. Why not add in a few player tiles that Blizzard has promised we would see more of in the Burning Crusade? Devising a system that will give the character you copied from on your home server a title such as Raid Dungeon Tester if you manage to complete the raid being released that patch. For example, this patch being completing Black Temple or even Hayal 2, I guess. This could be applied to solo content as well if you reach one of the milestones for that particular area. One change that Blizzard already made that I do agree with were the gear vendors that gave testers tier 5 level equipment, but only if they were honoured with the Violet Eye. I'd suggest that they keep this system for future patches, since it allows those who may not be in the absolute best skills to test as well, but obviously they do need to have done some Karazhan a few times in order to earn that latest gear. So, that's a fair point. Basically, he's saying that he doesn't want people going around and pouncing around in tier 5 gear for the sake of it rather than testing. The last change that I would like to see, this is what he says, is a required non-disclosure agreement, NDA, in order to even be on the PTRs in the first place. I would keep it similar to the agreements used for beta testing new games. After all, you are beta testing if you're on the PTR in the first place. Posting videos, screenshots, etc. of the new content would be prohibited, which would hopefully cut down the number of spoilers. In my opinion, these would be great first steps to improve the public test realm and give us patches with fewer less bugs. Yeah, I'd say that there is some validity to some of the things that's being said there. Offering an incentive for testing content is probably one of the best ideas I've ever heard. Right now, you have your high-end raiding guilds that are going in there. Nihilum, for example, are banging on as regards to Black Temple at the moment. And I've already seen Impervious have taken down the majority of the bosses, as have Curse, if I remember correctly, in Mount Hayal. Now the question is why? You can be cynical or you can be less cynical, but cynicism has to remain. The more cynical way of looking at things is that higher-end guilds are trying this content in order to get a leg up on everyone else, so that when they do it live, they will be able to breeze through it and get onto the bigger, tougher challenges quicker. Now, that would be a valid point, of course, if, and I'm saying if everyone didn't have access to it. If they were the only ones getting access to this content, then yeah, I could support that particular viewpoint. It's not to say that they're not anyway, but it's not that it's an advantage that high-end guilds actually have that other guilds don't. Let's face it. It's there if you're good enough to do it. If you're not good enough to do it, well, that's not actually anything to do with the fact that, oh, OMG, there is exploits and unfairness. That's simply due to the fact that you're not good enough. And that is a basic fact of life. You should go and improve. It's really that simple. Now, the less cynical way, of course, is that they are, in fact, beta testing and shaking down the content. Now, we have seen that GMs do actively look at the progress on PTRs, and they will death touch bosses, and they will also death touch trash to allow people to test other bosses. Now, that's fine. That is fine. Except for the fact that if you're not 100%ing to 0%ing a boss, then you can't really be said to have killed the boss and tested it thoroughly for bugs. We've already seen, with Lady Vash as a prime example, several rather nasty bugs. Nihilum had a hit point loss. Method had bugged out fear wards and also had the bats not despawn at the end of the encounter. Now that's very interesting. Now what does that say to you? What that should be saying to you, one would imagine, is that had that been tested 100% to 0%, those bugs would have occurred. Fear ward is, of course, your natural reaction if you're Alliance to something that pulses fear. There are Striders in that encounter which pulse fear, so you would have thought, okay, let's dump Fear Ward. Oh look, Fear Ward isn't disappearing. Yeah, that needs fixing. Obviously that wasn't done, otherwise such a glaring bug, which is obviously repeatable, would have been caught. A hit point loss? Well, we're not entirely sure what actually caused that. We think it's some kind of evade. Or at least that's what I'm hearing from Nihilum. If Nihilum would like to put me right on that, then by all means, email themurloc@gmail.com or contact me on IRC. However, again, yet another bug with that. And the fact that the Spore Bats didn't despawn. Have a look at Nihilum's kill. When Nihilum killed it, that wasn't the case. Vash died immediately, but spawned a second Vash. Now, you can't seriously tell me that with all of those bugs, you could have possibly missed those in internal testing on PTR. And that is in itself a major issue. It's a problem. Definitely. 110%. That is a big bloody issue. And certainly I would say that something has to be done about it. Now, I've got a few more emails to cover before we kick on with the interview today, so let's get on with it. Mr. David Tucker, also known as Bishdark from Masrigo EU. And he asked where the hell my grilling tour video is. Coming later. I'm of the same opinion as TB is on this. I don't want to know what lies in endgame content before it's live. I have only ever been on one PTR, and that was to test the new and shiny Palaret spec. I mainly PvP'd, did some basic instances like Onyxia, but I didn't want to see anything beyond my live progress. In fact, I can't see why people would want to put the work in to do so. It's not like your live character gets any benefit at all. The only benefit you gain is knowing the encounter before you do it on live. But again, that kills the suspense. One of the main factors of our guild's success is learning encounters for ourselves, and I find that brings far more satisfaction than finally downing a boss. When finally downing a boss, even. Now, I would agree on that, but I think there's not enough emphasis being put on the idea of knowing what's going to happen in the encounter, and knowing is half the battle, because knowledge is power, rah rah rah. That is a really major factor. There is very few advantages that you could consider to be any more significant than that. That's a lot of gain you can get out of that particular thing. Now, you cannot underestimate the value of that. And you cannot underestimate the fact that high-end guilds are going to go and do that. Now, I do still have issues with that. The problem with PTR right now is even if you had NDAs, like was suggested previously, even if you restricted all this content, it's still going to get leaked. It's going to be all over the place. And some people don't want to see it, and it is quite difficult to avoid. This is the kind of issue that's come up with in the past with kill videos, though kill videos are generally named as such. You don't have people going around spamming tactics on the forums. You don't go around and have pictures all over the place like, hey, look, this is stuff you haven't got to yet. Well, it ruins the suspense, ruins the surprise. Some people do have an issue with that. I have a minor issue with that. While it was cool to see a screenshot of Archimon, it's like, ooh, that is really, really nice looking. And seeing the kill videos of Supremus and some of the other Black Temple bosses, some of the previews of that, and even the Kael'thas preview stuff, that was all cool. That was nice. It's really a very delicate balancing act. Some people are going to want to see that, some people aren't, and sometimes it's quite difficult to avoid it because it will get all over the forums and you don't really have a choice but to have it thrust in your face. Now, let's see what else we got. That's a long one. Here we go. This is from Thurin. He's from Argentona EU, and he says this: personally, I steer clear of the PTR since I don't think there is any point in getting new content if by the time it's released it is no longer new since you've already seen it all. However, I do believe that it is important to test the new content, even though Blizzard isn't always as adept at reacting to the feedback. As an example, the Burning Crusade beta looked a lot different from the final version. Though at release there were still bugs, it is nothing compared to what the beta was like. Likewise, a lot of balance and ability issues were pointed out and were in fact fixed following test feedback likewise on the PTRs. Past history has shown that releasing content which hasn't been tested beforehand properly turns into rather a mess, and consequently, we often see that the boss fights that are fixed afterwards are the ones which they didn't get to test during the PTR period. Yeah, it's always interesting to see, actually. If you remember back in Blackwing Lair did not go in the PTR, and if I remember correctly, the first two bosses were actually unkillable. They were bugged out. Completely, totally messed up. And that is a bit of an issue. And he continues, of course, it also depends on the testers. For example, feedback like the one Curse wrote on Hayal helps the developers a lot, and you can check that out on Curse Skills forums. The kind of people that just think, lols, we get to try patch before you noobs don't really help. And I know some people have such a view of the PTRs. In some cases, certain people I know. So, the PTRs are very important for making sure we don't have to beta test the content once it's live, because no one ever saw if what they had actually made worked. But it's just as reliant on the testers doing their jobs properly and providing good constructive feedback and the devs actually reacting on the feedback. It's always interesting to look at stuff like that because that pretty much sums up my idea about beta testing in general. There's been something of a surge in how many public betas, open betas, are available recently in PC gaming in general. Now, that's interesting to see because a lot of people will argue, well, the vast majority of people who are coming here are not doing it to beta test. They're doing it to screw around in a game which isn't available yet. We had the same problem when I was beta testing Dawn of War. During the closed beta, we got a lot of changes done. We got a lot of good balancing, even UI changes. All of this really good stuff was dealt with. And then as soon as they opened the beta, it became 99% tards. Which is fine, because obviously, you know, infinite number of monkeys, infinite number of typewriters is going to produce Shakespeare. So if you throw enough people at the problem, no matter how stupid they might be, you can hope that one or two are going to pull up some valid information. You can also bear in mind the idea of stress testing servers and shaking down content. The more people you get doing it, the larger a probability there is that someone is going to find something wrong. The question is, are they going to report it in such a fashion which is helpful? Are they going to give a constructive fix? Are they going to feedback the information at all, or are they going to exploit it for all they're worth? I seem to recall back in Dawn of War that there were certain problems as regards to balance, and what generally happened was, when someone found an imbalanced thing, they did not actually report it, they just exploited it to get free wins. It was all an E-peen thing, which was kind of disturbing. So what can we conclude? Can this be fixed? The one thing you can also bear in mind about the PTRs and open beta testing in general is that it can be something of a marketing tool, and that makes the idea of fixing it and making it a very productive area very, very difficult. When Blizzard look at money, they think, alright, okay, here's something that we can use to keep people playing the game by showing them what's coming up next. It's a teaser for the content. It's all there, you can go and try it out, now please continue paying for the game. There's nothing really invalid about that as such, but it does seem to me that the overall purpose of the public test realm is certainly blurred. Very, very much so. And that's harmful. You're not going to get an awful lot out of that. When bugs still remain on encounters like Vash, when bugs still remain on Kael'thas, on the fact that Hyal wasn't even done, stuff like that, then you've got to really look very, very carefully at how people are testing and whether or not Blizzard actually needs to direct people in the idea of testing certain things. Whether they simply need to bring people on, Uber guilds, if need be, that are willing to test the content for them, and rather than just doss around. Is there a fix? It's very difficult to say. Arguably, the idea of the PTR simply just cannot be fixed. It's too far gone. It's this whole idea of the commercialized open beta. The idea of, again, keeping your consumers chomping at the bit for content. Nothing necessarily wrong with that. But if you're really going to test your content, that is certainly not the arena to do it in. Now, this is what you've been waiting for, hopefully all evening, so I'm going to play it for you right now. This interview was recorded yesterday. It was with Sko, main tank and guildmaster of Method, and of course Ray as well, healing lead for Method, and they are the world's second Vash killers, and they're addressing all sorts of issues. This interview is just over an hour long, so sit back, relax and enjoy, courtesy of WoW Radio Method. This is their exclusive interview. Enjoy.